The Kalrathi were born warriors. Their claws could tear through durasteel. Their reflexes operated on a level that made most species appear frozen in time, and their reputation as the galaxy's most feared mercenaries was well earned. What they were not known for was vanity, until Celine Varick lost her hairbrush. The human liaison officer had been stationed aboard the Crimson Talon for 3 standard months, serving as the bridge between Earth's expeditionary forces and the Kalrathi Warpack Delta 7. It was a position that required equal parts diplomacy and courage. The Kalrathi respected strength, and Celine had proven hers by surviving their initiation rituals without complaint. She'd earned her place among them, even if she stood barely chest-height to the smallest warrior. The hairbrush had been a gift from her sister, carved from earth oak with boar bristles. Practical, durable, and irreplaceable. Celine had last seen it on her bunk before the cubs. The juvenile Kalrathi, who served as scouts and apprentices, had been assigned to clean the habitat modules. She found it 3 days later in the training warren. Ril, a young Kalrathi barely into his second molt, stood in the center of a circle of his fellow cubs. His mane, normally a wild, chaotic explosion of dark fur that marked him as adolescent, had been transformed. It was brushed back from his face in elegant waves, each strand catching the harsh warren lights like spun copper. The effect was striking, almost regal. The other cubs watched with wide, luminous eyes as Ril demonstrated a combat sequence, his movements fluid and precise. But it wasn't his technique they were focused on. It was the way his groomed mane flowed with each motion, adding a dramatic flourish to every strike. Celine stood in the doorway, arms crossed, fighting the smile that threatened to break her diplomatic composure. "That's my hairbrush," she said. 7 cubs froze. Ril's ears flattened against his skull, a gesture of submission that looked comical given his otherwise fierce appearance. He clutched the brush absurdly small in his clawed hand like a child caught stealing sweets. "Human Selena," Ril's voice rumbled, still high-pitched compared to the adult warriors. "I did not steal. I borrowed. For training purposes. Training purposes." Celine stepped into the warren, eyebrow raised. "What does grooming have to do with combat training?" Ril's ears perked up slightly, sensing an opportunity. "Observe." He handed the brush to another cub and returned to the center of the circle. "Standard attack pattern. Sequence 4. He moved through the forms a series of strikes, blocks, and evasive maneuvers that would have impressed any instructor. Then he stopped, retrieved the brush, and spent 30 seconds working through his mane. When he repeated the sequence, something had changed. His movements carried a different energy. There was confidence in his posture, a sense of presence that transcended mere technique. The groomed mane didn't just look impressive, it moved like a living thing, emphasizing each motion, adding psychological weight to every gesture. "Enemies hesitate," Ril explained, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "When we look like warriors of legend, they doubt. That doubt is advantage." Celine studied him thoughtfully. The Kalrathi were apex predators, but they were also pack hunters who understood instinctively what humans had codified into military psychology: morale, presentation, and the power of image. Ril had stumbled onto something that generations of human soldiers had known. Appearance affected both the wearer and the observer. "Show me again," she said. By the time the training session ended, Celine had witnessed something remarkable. Each cub took turns with the brush, grooming their manes into styles that suited their individual personalities. Some went for the swept-back look that Ril favored. Others created braided patterns or sculpted their fur into aggressive spikes. One inventive cub even managed a style that made her mane fan out like a threat display. The transformation wasn't just aesthetic. The cubs moved differently, straighter, stronger, more confident. They believed they looked formidable, and that belief translated into better performance. When Commander Drakthar entered the warren for his inspection, he stopped dead. The massive Kalrathi warrior regarded his cubs with an expression that might have been confusion, anger, or possibly indigestion. His own mane was a tangled mess, as was traditional for warriors who had transcended vanity through countless battles. "Explain," he growled. Celine stepped forward before the cubs could panic. "Psychological warfare training, Commander. I was teaching them about human military traditions, specifically, the practice of maintaining appearance to boost morale and intimidate opponents. Drakthar's eyes narrowed. Humans. Groom before battle? We do. Celine met his gaze steadily. We polish our armor, press our uniforms, and maintain our appearance. It's a ritual that prepares the mind for combat. It says, I'm not afraid to die, but I'll look damn good doing it. The commander was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he huffed a sound that was almost laughter. Cubs often have wisdom that warriors forget. We were young once, when appearance mattered. He turned to leave, then paused. Human Selene, your grooming tool. It is. Effective? Very. I will acquire 30 for the pack. Battle readiness must be maintained across all dimensions, physical, mental, and... He gestured vaguely at his own disheveled mane. Presentational. After the commander left, Rill approached Selene, still clutching her original brush. You defended us. Even though we took your possession. You didn't take it, Selene corrected gently. You found a use for it that I'd never imagined. That's not theft. That's innovation. She held out her hand. Rill placed the brush in it with obvious reluctance, his ears drooping. Selene examined the brush, noting the Kalrathi fur now mixed with her own hair and the bristles. Then she handed it back. Keep it. Consider it a gift between warriors. But when those 30 new brushes arrive, you're teaching everyone in the pack your grooming techniques. Deal? Rill's eyes widened, then he stood straighter, clutching the brush to his chest. I will not fail you, human Selene. 3 weeks later, Earth Command received a perplexing report from Sector 9. Kalrathi Warpack Delta 7 had been observed entering combat situations with what appeared to be elaborately styled manes, suggesting possible ceremonial or religious significance. Enemy forces were reportedly highly unsettled by the display. Casualty rates for Delta 7 had dropped by 18%. Enemy surrender rates had increased by 23%. Military analysts struggled to explain the correlation. Selene, reading the report in her quarters, smiled. She'd received a package from home, a new hairbrush from her sister, along with a note asking why her previous letters had been full of hair care advice for giant cat people. Outside her door, she could hear the sounds of the pack preparing for evening drills. And underneath the usual growls and weapons clatter, there was a new sound. The rhythmic stroke of bristles through fur, and the quiet pride of warriors who had learned that sometimes, looking like a legend, was the first step to becoming one. Humanity had brought many things to the galactic stage: technology, diplomacy, art. Now they could add one more contribution to the list. The strategic hair flip. Rill would have been proud.